everybody. Welcome back to Mild Sauce Live. It's Saturday, so you know what that means. We are doing live streaming all day. I'm Jake Krez, your just general background host for lots of these things. I'm here with the man of the hour, though, Steve Breit, the Rock Discovery Show, discovering all the rock in and around the city of Chicago and beyond. What's going on, Steve? We got episode 5 today.
Absolutely. Great to be here on this beautiful, snowy Saturday afternoon in Chicago.
Yeah, man. A lot of us got the day off yesterday. If you're not from Chicago, if you're listening from somewhere else around the country, the world, or beyond, I don't know who's beyond, but we got dumped on snow by a foot. There's been a little bits of work here and there. Most people stayed home yesterday, so it's a perfect day to get real cozy. We got some nice beers to warm up the soul a little bit, and some music to do the same.
Absolutely. You know, if most of the city snowed in, but we're here jamming out on a Saturday afternoon on Mild Sauce.
Absolutely. So this week, last week we dove in appropriately to Boston and Philadelphia. We had Paul Abood here in the studio talking hardcore punk rock from Boston, Philadelphia, in honor of the Super Bowl, of course.
Absolutely.
Shout out the Eagles on the win.
Absolutely. Oh, man. That was so great to see, wasn't it?
I didn't realize, honestly, I think it was maybe you and me talk about it the other day. I didn't realize that was their first win until after they won.
Yeah, they're one of those old school teams that won a bunch of championships pre-Super Bowl and then never got it together since the 60s.
They definitely made it count, man. The city, they basically tore the entire city apart. I was a little bit scared leading up to that because there was a guy who punched a horse in the face in the divisional finals and stuff. They're pretty crazy, man.
Fires, collapse in the the Ritz-Carlton's lobby.
Perfectly suited for a hardcore show, though.
Absolutely appropriate. But yeah, man, those fuckers, they partied after that win, and deservedly so. Good game.
They meant it for sure. But this week we're doing something a little bit different. Slower, heavier. Did I mess it up again?
Nope. Slower, heavier, louder. We're getting back into a little bit of a groove. You know, last week we kind of, in a football sense, called an audible and did a Super Bowl themed episode. Now we're back to that regular Chicago fucking vibe that we're doing here. So
absolutely.
So yeah, this week, like I said, it's a little bit slower, it's a little bit heavier, it's a little bit doomier, a little bit stoner, a little bit post metal, post hardcore. As you heard from the opening song, that was Bong Ripper, Chicago fucking stalwarts. That was a track called The People Mover, and that was off of their second LP called Hippie Killer out of 2007. Great fucking record. These guys have, like I said, they're Chicago heavy stalwarts. They've been around forever. They just played the city a couple months ago. I forget exactly where, but
nice.
They're around. They're great, and like I said, this is getting people warmed up into the vibe of this afternoon's episode. So what we're gonna be hearing is a little bit of new stuff, a little bit of old stuff, but in that slower beat. Like I said, we're gonna be kind of traversing the landscape of that heavier scene in the city, and there's some deep roots, so we'll be dipping back into that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. We're going to be catching up with some fresh bands that are checking out in Chicago, new records. We're going to be talking a little bit about a show that I saw a couple weeks ago at the Livewire Lounge, beautiful Livewire Lounge in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It was, we'll get into that in a little bit. I think we got a few other things to get to first.
Absolutely. So you want to jump back into some music real quick and
you know what?
Out, or?
Let's talk a little bit. As you saw,
you got your toys
intro,
here. Yeah.
As we saw in the intro, trying to match, nice local brews to nice local fucking music. This week we are featuring Revolution Brewing, nice hometown beer. They are getting into that bourbon barrel game, and we're checking some of that out today. So we've got Death's Tar. Nice local brew. We're all fucking digging on it here in Chicago. Mild sauce in the afternoon, fucking day drinking. But no, this is
always. And this is you said this is their first bourbon barrel. We got a little zoom in on it here for all the people at home if you're looking to check it out. Little pricey though.
Yeah.
Little pricey. Revolution really trying to get that profit margin up, huh? So what was it? $25 for 4 cans?
$25. Yeah. But, if you're a beer fan, you're gonna fucking check this shit out and pay for it, and we all do. So here we are drinking it.
It's very thick. It'll definitely keep your insides warm in these tough cold times.
Yep,
But,
yep. Bourbon barrel aged, so it's thick and a little bit boozy.
They're
So,
coming for Goose Island, man. I saw in the newspapers this week. They're finally starting to ask that question: who's like the who's going to unseat Goose Island? It looks like Revolution's leading that pack.
absolutely, man. They stepped up to the bat, and I gotta say, this is definitely a Bourbon County Stout fighter.
Fighter.
It's on that level. These guys coming out hard with the competition, and I gotta say, it's they're on that level, man. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, man. The red and black definitely lends itself to a the whole like look of it too is kind of very Chicago-esque. So they're definitely keeping it hometown.
Yep.
And who we got every week, for those of you who don't know, not only does Steve bring along a great beer for us to taste out, check out, and let you all know about, but also we have a shirt that usually goes along with our theme for the evening.
Absolutely. And that's its perfect segue. We're going to swing into the next track. And as you can see, a little precursor of what we're going to hear. This is Cobra. Shirts from the 2013 Earth release. Great fucking record. Again, these guys, Chicago stalwarts. I think back and I have a hard time thinking of a more ubiquitous Chicago act in regards to, they're a great hometown band, but every time heavy touring acts, like top tier touring acts are coming through the city, you always see these guys on the bill. They're a great band. I was thinking about this over last night when I was preparing the set list, and I think I've seen Sweet Cobra more than any other Chicago band. They're great friends with a lot of local bands in the city, so I see them a lot opening for like Sweet Cobra. But I was thinking back and I just saw them. What was it? They played with Mutoid Man, another band that we talked about in an earlier episode. They played with High on Fire. I saw them at New Year's Eve a couple years ago. I mean, these guys, they are out. They're hardworking, great band. I think back, and in the early 2000s, might have been 2002, 2003, I went to their record release party for their debut album, Praise, at the Fireside Bowl, back when they used to play shows. And, leading right into that, at that record release show, I think back, and they had production problems, and the album wasn't ready in time. So if you went to the record release show, you got this great hand-printed, limited edition CD that I think totally made up for the production difficulties that they had. So we're going to be diving into a track from Sweet Cobra's debut album, Praise, from 2003. This is a track called Leviathan. Check it out.
Let's check it out.
Mild Sauce in the Afternoons.
That's
was Leviathan from Sweet Cobra. A little more angst in that one than the previous track.
Absolutely. We're going to go a little bit across the spectrum of slower, heavier Chicago music. And, Sweet Cobra is a great band. Like I said, they're Chicago staples. They've been around for years. They've been consistently putting out great, solid music, solid records. They play around. They support acts when they come into the city. They're one of these great local bands that I love seeing, and actually, that brings us into a little bit of music news.
Okay.
So
lay it on us, Steve.
Absolutely, just trying to keep everything local and talking about all this awesome shit in Chicago. So if anybody wants to harken back to our earlier episodes, one of the bands that I was talking about that I read about last year and was hoping for good things this year is a band called Relayer. RLYR.
That was one of our earlier shows, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was on one of the Anticipation episodes.
Absolutely.
And
the Anticipation episodes.
Absolutely.
Like
and paying off on those anticipations just this week, it was announced that Relayer is coming out with a new LP called Actual Existence. This is going to be coming out, I believe, April 10th. And the reason I bring it up, April 21st at the Beat Kitchen, Relayer is going to be playing a record release show for this new LP, and opening is Sweet Cobra.
Hey,
so
we brought that one full all the way around.
Absolutely. If you're digging on what we're playing here on Mild Sauce on Saturday afternoons, this is a great showcase to check out some fucking awesome local music from tried and true, just professionals, great guys. Again, hang out in the scene, hang out at these shows, be real cool. And, these guys are cool to you. So after the sets, hang out, they're at the merch table. You can get a little bit of a closer connection with the Chicago music. Everybody in these bands, they're great. I've spoken with all of them over the years. Just real down to earth, relatable guys making great music. And this is your opportunity to see some great fucking music. April 21st at the Beat Kitchen.
Get out there, man. Beat Kitchen, always a great place to catch a show.
Yeah, Beat Kitchen is one of those hidden little gem locations.
Well, it's like in the middle of nowhere. It's by. I love the Beat Kitchen, but it's by like every time I go, I see it. Like driving around the city or in like back of an Uber, so I'm like, oh yeah, that's where the Beat Kitchen is.
Yeah, it's never top of mind, but once you see a set coming up there, it's like, oh sweet.
Right, exactly. Did you also see, not to jump off on a separate point, but Shuba's just reopened or like took down the scaffolding. Have you heard about that?
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, they have like a beautiful new restaurant which kind of like y'all got rid of that alley where people used to pull in to load their stuff in. So like that seemed like a bad decision, but shout out Shuba's for getting bougie with it.
Absolutely. Chicago always moving forward, but yeah,
yes, recently moving forward.
Absolutely, but another great Chicago venue,
Oh yeah, definitely.
And speaking of great Chicago venues, another bit of music news I wanted to relay to you guys this week, again, relates back to another band that was spoken about in the Anticipations episode. Horror is coming back to Reggie's the day before that Relayer show. So 4/20, perfect fucking day, April 20th at Reggie's.
Is that a weekend? Is that...
No, I think it's a weeknight.
Oh, well, I mean, that's back-to-back shows. That's not a bad week, you guys.
Back-to-back shows. I think it's a Thursday, Friday.
That's not bad. I mean, Thursday is basically Chicago's Friday.
Exactly. Nobody comes into work on time on Friday anyway. But yeah, definitely. This is one of those bands. Like I said, it was in my anticipations earlier. I've seen them a few times already. I cannot recommend this band highly enough. Every time that I check them out on YouTube or on the news, they're playing bigger and bigger venues. Last year I saw them at the Beat Kitchen, saw them in Austin at their showcase at South by Southwest. Just fantastic, and bridging, hip hop, punk, metal. I mean, these guys are just cross genre, fuck genre, no genre. Super excited to see them.
These are like, I remember Horror was like one of the bands that you played for me that I've like actually gone back to.
Yeah.
Over the last few weeks, there's been a few, but like that's the one that always stuck out in my head. Maybe because of the 9s in the name, like I don't know what it is. But.
And the nice thing about them is they've got a few full lengths, several EPs. They just released a new single a couple weeks ago. They're coming out with another collab with Three Teeth, who they're playing with. So it's going to be a horror Three Teeth split tour. They're going to be playing tracks off of their collab together at this new fucking set. So it's going to be really fucking cool. And if you like these guys, want to dig into their catalog, definitely their 2017 album, United States of Horror, fantastic. But check out dig deep into their catalog. It's good stuff. It's experimental. It's pushing the genre forward. It's pushing sound forward. I really am excited to see them.
Awesome. Do we got something you want to play coming up? Or?
I think coming out of the music news. Let's dip into.
My bad. I felt the segue coming. I thought I'd jump on it. My fault.
This is a perfect segue. So coming out of the music news, let's dip into our feature. So,
okay.
This afternoon, I wanted to talk about a great live set I saw just a couple weeks ago at Livewire Lounge. Beautiful Livewire Lounge on Milwaukee Avenue. Check it out.
Where's that at, actually, on Milwaukee?
Oh, shit. Is it? It's Milwaukee. Oh, it's right by Cross Street. I'm terrible with fucking addresses.
all right,
put me on the spot here. No worries. But they got a great they got a website, Facebook, so check them out. Anyway, they do punk nights, metal nights. A couple weeks ago, I saw a metal show over there. It was 3 bands, and those are the 3 bands we're going to talk about in our feature this afternoon.
Dope. All at Chicago? Is this?
Yes.
Okay.
All Chicago area, let's
Chicago,
say.
all right. I mean, Chicagoland.
Yeah, Chicagoland.
Where would we be without all those suburbs? No, but those of you who are new to the show, Steve is, if you haven't picked it up by now, is an avid traveler of the concert scene, the punk scene, the rock scene, all scenes in Chicago. So a lot of what's derived for the show comes from these live sets. So tell us a little bit, like, how'd you end up at the show? What was the initial thing? Why'd you buy a ticket? You're a ticket buyer. I'm not a big ticket guy.
Yeah,
so,
and
I respect that about you.
I'm one of the few people that likes to have, artifacts because, I party and drink, smoke, whatever. But like, over the years, over time, you see enough shows, you kind of forget about stuff. So I like artifacts. So I'm a physical ticket guy. So if there's an option when I'm online buying tickets to say, mail me my tickets, I'm taking it.
Hey.
But no, this was a great show. It was Uncouth, Mako Sika, and Sun God Ra. Now, the reason I was hyped to that show was because in my travels, checking out local music, I had heard of Sun God Ra before. I hadn't heard of the other bands, but, Sun God Ra, it's a name that kind of sticks with you because, there's a band called Sun God, there's a band called Sun Ra.
Exactly.
It's the ancient Egyptian Sun God Ra is the most triumphant, greatest of all the gods. So it's a pretty strong name.
Well, I got confused because I hear you and Paul talking about this at work all the time. I'm thinking you guys are talking about like an experimental jazz trio from like the 70s. Like, what's going on? But yeah, all right. So Sun God Ra.
Yeah, so that was the band that drew me in, and actually, it was almost a mistake. So last year, I was jamming out to another band called Sun God, and when I saw the set list for this show, I was like, "Oh, sweet, Sun God's playing." And then I checked out Sun God Ra's Bandcamp link and was like, "Oh no, this is a different band, but they fucking kick ass." So I got, jammed out to them. Was like, no, this is going to be a fucking cool set. So went out there, and I was not disappointed. So we're going to be checking out a track from each of the bands. The first band we're going to check out is a band called Uncouth. We're going to be listening to a track off of their EP called Tree of Woe, which was released. When was that released? That was released a couple months ago in 2017. Track we're going to listen to is called Fall from Paradise. And, why don't we dig into it, and then we can talk a little bit about it once we jump back out.
Sounds great, man.
Awesome.
This is Uncouth, Fall from Paradise. Uncouth, Fall from Paradise, the new one, the old one, in between one.
Yeah, that was the new one off of Tree of Woe, their EP from 2017. And like I was saying, man, they were really cool. This was a set that I was coming into. I'd never seen or heard these guys before, so I was coming in a little bit blind. But I was impressed by the fact that, you know, they had that cool, doomy, sludgy, you know, post-metal vibe. But seeing them live, and of course, you know, you see a band live, you see a band, or you listen to the band on the CD, you know, sometimes you get a little bit different experience. I think they were accomplished musicians. They played a great set. But seeing them live, it was almost a little bit like they were infusing an emphasis on a good singer with a good vocal range. You know, you listen to a lot of bands, and it's that grunted, screaming, you know, heavy vocals. And these guys were not afraid to tap into that vocal scale.
Where do you fall on that spectrum? Like, we were talking when we were off air, just listening to that, about the, you know, coming from, we always talk about initial influences of music and that always influencing what you like and what you're into, but where do you fall on the spectrum of like the screaming grunginess, like you called it? I used a word I can't think of off the top of my head right now. Sludgy, yeah, I like that. Like that grungy sludginess. Where would you fall between that and like what you said, somebody who's like more of a singer in a rock band or in a hardcore band or something like that?
You know, I don't, you know, I'm not a black and white guy. I think everything in its place. And if you've got a great singer who's got great range and your, you know, musical structure, your vibe aligns with that, that's fucking dope. You know, a lot of times if you listen to a lot of that primal first releases out of a lot of like punk, metal, hardcore, you know, the gamut of heavier bands, you'll see a lot of like scream vocals, you know, shouted, grunted, and to a certain degree, it's that raw ethic. But I think, you know,
I mean, there's a shitload of emotion in it.
It's emotion, it's pure id, you know, expressing that. But in some regards, it could be seen as a cover for a little bit of vocal limitations.
Well, that was again what I was gonna say, right? Like, I mean, if you have a great band but no one can sing, like, you still have a great band, right? So you just kind of figure it out until like
exactly.
I feel like that's a lot of great bands like kind of did that until they like shit. I remember reading about the Rolling Stones. Like Mick Jagger wasn't exactly a singer when they first came out.
Yeah, you know, I mean, if you want to dip back into the Stones, you know, Mick Jagger wasn't really a singer, and the rest of the band wasn't really like music writers. You know, if you listen to the first couple of Stones records, they're doing Bo Diddley covers, they're doing Buddy Guy covers. I mean, they're a cover band, and it doesn't get until at least like 12 by 5 where they start spreading their own musical wings and experimenting and becoming the band that they truly were.
So tell me this, like, and we're getting off topic now, and I apologize.
No, this is all you know, blues based guitar rock.
Yeah,
you know?
right. So my thing is, you heard all this stuff about like Quincy Jones and like the Vulture interview where he just kind of let it all fly. One of the things he said in that interview was like that he just thought the Beatles were trash, essentially, and like one of the worst rock bands ever and stuff. And he just really went in on the Beatles and said they were like bad songwriters and stuff. And that's a debate that a lot of people have. But when you go back in history and you realize that like the Rolling Stones only learned to write songs by learning from the Beatles, where does that put the Rolling Stones in the conversation? Because like I felt, you know, that's like making fun of Michael Jordan, but like when you say like Michael Jordan ain't shit and he taught like 3 other dudes how to do something, then like what are you saying about that?
You know, it's an interesting paradigm that they're found in. You know, I think all of the British imported rock and roll, you know, that kind of grows out, you know, it started here. You know, it is blues put to an electric guitar. That was
Maxwell Street.
Yeah, that was distilled. I mean, even beyond that, I mean, Maxwell Street certainly, but you know, Maxwell Street grew up listening to Delta blues. And,
yeah. But I mean, that was the first place that a dude just plugged in a guitar to a wall, right?
Yeah.
And started playing music, so it was like a wall, like an amp. But like, you know, it was the first time like a guitar got electrified. It was right down the street from where we are now, right down Halstead, which that's why I love this city. That's why we both love this city.
But you know, to Quincy's, you know, point, I would definitely agree with him on the early stuff because all of those guys, you know what I mean? Whether it was the Stones or the Beatles, and of course, you know, to kind of put this in context, when I was growing up, my dad was a Stones devotee, and my mom is a Beatles, you know, fanatic. So I grew up with the Stones Beatles arguments, and you know what I mean, which one's better, which one's more real, and in that dynamic, I've grown to appreciate both. But I will say, and this is something that comes out of being born after the fact. You know, we were kind of talking about this off air earlier, but like when you kind of come to a band and you realize you like them, you like them at a point where which you came into them. But then if they're a band that predates you, then you don't have a root or an anchor to base your stuff off of. So you kind of dip around. And if you look at early Stones and look at early Beatles, you know, they were definitely reverential and, you know, borrowing, some could say aping, of, you know, Delta blues, American blues, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and then from there they grew and became their own thing. So I'd say, to Quincy Jones's point, certainly the early stuff, the nascent musical offerings by both the Stones and the Beatles, and all early British rock for that matter.
Right.
You know, it definitely is aping off of, you know, African American, Southern American, you know, roots, out of the gospel, out of the plantations, out of the spirituals. You know.
I mean, there's always that crazy story of that we've talked about plenty, where it was like the Beatles going to Chess Records for the first time, and Muddy Waters was like mopping the floor.
Yeah,
you know, like that's insane,
unbelievable.
And that was like the Mick Jagger's biggest hero. You know what I mean? Like he's sitting there working for his record time and stuff like that. And
but
they're ripping it off. Yeah, I don't know. It's like that's the crazy thing about these old bands, like years and years later.
But you know, moving on from that, and I think divergent to that point, you know, once Stones gets to Exile on Main Street and the Beatles, at least to me, gets to Rubber Soul, you know, you're branching away from what they started with and what they were borrowing with, and they are putting their own, you know, their own culture, their own mentality, their own personal views and life experiences into it, and they're making that something that grew beyond, you know, what they were borrowing. So I think Quincy definitely has a point of early era Stones Beatles, but I would argue that, you know, Keith Richards, Mick Jagger, and, you know, Lennon and McCartney, and you know, all the band, you know what I mean? But they really kind of evolved away from that, and it became their own thing. That was, again, transported back to America, and how that was distilled. I mean, that's the beauty of, you know, cross-culture music in the 20th and the 21st century. You know, it borrows, it shares, it grows, and it builds.
And I mean, you talk a lot about like evolution of sound. The band that you have coming up as well was a band that you like mentioned specifically.
Yeah,
like really done a lot of experimental, evolutionary stuff with their sound as well.
Yeah. So the next band we're going to hear from is a band called Mako Sika, and exactly to your point, Jake, this is a band that evolves and takes that rock and roll structure and really pushes the edges and the limits. I would argue that they walk the tightrope almost into more jazz, more experimental. You know, it's definitely guitar driven and guitar based, but as you'll hear, it evolves and it moves out beyond that verse, chorus, verse, blues rock structure into something different.
And you're hilarious, and I love doing these shows with you because I've never gotten into like a doom metal, heavy metal situation where someone's been like, yeah, but they're kind of like a jazz band too.
well, stay tuned. And
hey, stay tuned. All right, we're gonna check this out. It's Mako Sika, Mako Sika,
Mako Sika, Makosica.
We're a couple of white dudes with German ancestry, so we might not be saying that right. But Mako Sika, Sacrifice. Check it out. Now you can hear me. Makosika, Sacrifice. The Steve Breit Rock Discovery Show. I'm Jake Krez, and we're here on Mild Sauce Radio doing our streaming Saturdays.
Yep.
What's going on, Steve?
All right, Mild Sauce Rockin' Afternoons. So
Rockin'
we just heard Makosika. That was off their Invocation EP that was released last year. So it's pretty new. And, I just got to point out, I got to give major props to a band that takes time and does a nice presentation in their production. This is a great looking CD, nice die cut, nice printing. It plays really nice with each other.
That's crazy. I mean, Steve in his day job happens to deal in art quite a bit, so this is he's kind of a sucker for these types of things.
Absolutely.
But no, this is actually really crazy.
Heavy props, much appreciated. You know what I mean? That's some quality. So good on them. And as you heard, I really dig this band. To me, they felt like they're in that almost hidden gap of like Pink Floyd stylistics, where it's after Syd Barrett, it's after Saucer Full of Secrets, but it's not quite to the accomplished, studied level of Dark Side of the Moon. This is in that weird gap where they were putting out like More and Atom Heart Mother and the experimental soundtracks, and this is a lot of the vibe that I got out of seeing Makosika.
So do you feel like this is their sound that they've arrived on, or do you feel like this is more of like maybe an exploratory time for these guys? Trying to, like,
I would say it's exploratory. I would say, while seeing them was great, as you could hear, like listening to them, very cool, very different structure, neat stuff. I'd love to hear more from them. I'm excited to see their musical journey and if this is your starting point, where do you go from here?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool. I mean, yeah, that's like the most fun part of like following musicians anyway, or doing this at any point is like getting in on the ground floor and being able to watch them all the way up.
And that's the beauty of music, and that's the beauty of music in a diverse city like Chicago, where you can kind of see like all these little disparate fingers of genres.
Yeah, it might be disparate, but you also might get a whole bunch of bands that mix up the three words Sun God and Ra. So I know that's like who you have coming up in a band that you've been talking a lot to me about. But there is a few bands with Sun and God and Ra in the name.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the one we're listening to today is actually Sun God Ra.
Yes, absolutely. So not to be mistaken with Sun Ra, who's pretty big, and not to be mistaken for Sun God, who's more experimental, but not this band.
Right.
We are speaking this afternoon about Sun God Ra, and they were the headliners at that Livewire show.
Oh, okay.
And absolutely,
That's what you're just saying. Yeah.
they were great. They nailed it. Like I'd said, I'd initially thought they were somebody else, but being pleasantly surprised that they weren't, and went out to the show and they nailed it. Really good stuff. This gets into, and this transitions. We've been hearing a lot of different facets of Chicago heavy guitar based, stoner, doom, post rock, post metal, and this is a different facet of it. Whereas we heard a little bit more of the sludgy stuff, a little bit more of the doomy stuff, a little bit more of the experimental stuff. This band, Sun God Ra, gets more into the more, I think, to me at least, like traditional stoner rock.
The traditional stoner rock. Tell me more.
As with all genres of music, the nerd could subdivide and subgenre it out a million different ways into like the myriad fractals of rock music. But Sun God Ra to me is in the groove-based stoner rock, a la, I would say maybe like Pallbearer or Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, or maybe like Goat Snake or Orange Goblin, where it's more groove rock based, where they get onto a nice groove and they ride it out, as far as it'll take them.
Mm-hmm.
This is a genre I think it's been always around, obviously since the origins with the Ground Zero, the Great Black Sabbath. But these guys, they keep reverential and traditional into that more groove based, good time. It's not, they're not leaning on the, heavy bong rips, or they're not leaning on like, you know what I mean? You can kind of go about it a million different ways, but these guys, like I said, I think they strike it right down the middle with a good, long, well done exploration into a nice groove, into a nice beat, and we'll hear that in this next track. And leading right into that, this is going to be a song called Lone, and it's off of the Sun God Ra EP from 2017.
Dope. We're gonna check that one out. Here it is. Sun God Ra, Lone. Definitely some different feels from that than we had in the last few songs. Um, what stands out to you about that? Why is that somebody that you know really passionate about at this moment in history?
Like I said, it's a nice groove driven vibe. As you heard on the track, good stuff. They got a nice groove. It's not as I think maybe trapped in its own heaviness. You know what I mean? Like, this is a nice, like, crack a beer, smoke a joint, chill out.
Stone music.
Exactly. They very much embody the genre, and I think they're very good. And to that point, I wanted to call out. Keep an eye out for, if you dig the music that you're hearing. Sun God Ra is playing 5 days from now, February 15th.
Oh shit.
Yep. They are opening at Reggie's for the Hazy Tones. So if you dug that band, they're playing in a couple of days. So check them out.
That's a great lineup of band names.
Absolutely, and I think we're getting close to the end of our little musical journey this Saturday afternoon, and I would be remiss if I couldn't take it back, this genre, this style, this city, to ground zero. So we're going to go a little bit of a time warp back in time to 1984. Another local Chicago music. They're not going to be venerated in the Rock Hall of Fame, but they're definitely influential. They're
in the Steve Breit Rock Hall of Fame.
They're in the Steve Breit Rock Hall of Fame, certainly. But I think that a lot of what we listened to this afternoon wouldn't have happened without this band. So,
bold statement.
Absolutely. So I'd be remiss to not to bring us to Trouble. So Trouble is the quintessential Chicago doom band of the early 80s.
Take your word for it on this one. I think we're going to ride out on this song. We're going to make our closing, but I just want to say thank you to everybody listening. Thank you to Steve for being out here, of course, every Saturday. You can catch us again next Saturday. We'll be back again around 1:30, 2 o'clock, somewhere in there. The snow got us a little late today, so we apologize. We're always here on Mild Sauce Radio on YouTube, and, of course, at mildsauce.co, where you can catch all the episodes afterwards. You can also catch Do Right Radio later today at 4:30. And we got In the Kitchen with Elite Tuesdays, 6 to 7 p.m. The Cool Show with Evie the Cool, Fridays from 2 to 4 p.m. And every day, 8 to 10, I come on your radio and give you guys the latest singles from Chicago. But we're going to ride out the Steve Breit Rock Discovery Show. Steve, you want to take us out real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. And, as always, don't forget to check me out on social media. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Collarbone666. If you like what we're playing on Saturday afternoons on Mild Sauce Radio, you can check out pictures and videos from the shows that I talk about on the social. So be sure to check that out, and always check into Mild Sauce Radio. And like I said, we're going out on the debut album from 1984 from the Chicago band Trouble. The album is called Psalm 9, and we're going to be listening to the first track off of that album, The Tempter.
All right, here it is. Thanks again for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week.